Sarah took a deep breath, the smell of fresh paint and old cardboard filling her lungs. This was it. Apartment 1313. The building itself was pre-war, full of the kind of character that estate agents loved, which really meant creaking floors and a temperamental elevator. But the apartment was spacious, the rent was a miracle for the city, and she loved the view. The 13th floor button in the elevator was worn and brassy, a detail she found amusing. She wasn't superstitious. The first week was a chaotic bliss of unpacking boxes and learning the building's quirks. It was quiet. The hallway, long and carpeted in a faded burgundy, seemed to swallow all sound. She hadn't even met her neighbors. The first gift appeared on a Tuesday morning. She opened her door to grab her coffee delivery and almost tripped on it. It was a small rag doll, sewn with clumsy, uneven black thread. Its skin was made of faded sackcloth, and it had two mismatched button eyes, one blue, one a chipped mother of pearl. It was unsettling. Weird, she muttered, nudging it with her foot. Maybe a welcome gift from a very eccentric neighbor. She picked it up, holding it by a single thread arm, and tossed it into the back of her closet, determined to forget it. The second gift came 3 days later. This time, it was a box of chocolates. Not just any chocolates, but a specific, obscure brand of dark chocolate infused with chili, a luxury she only bought for herself on special occasions. This time, a cold dread settled in her stomach. This wasn't a coincidence. She was meticulously private. Her social media was locked down. She had only mentioned these chocolates once, months ago, to a colleague at her old job. She spent the afternoon trying to rationalize it. Had the delivery guy seen her buy them before? Had she left a wrapper in the trash? She felt a new, unwelcome awareness. She was being observed. Then came a knock. It was just after 1 a.m. She was drifting off to sleep when the sound echoed through her door. Knock. Pause. Knock. Pause. Knock. They were slow, measured, and felt impossibly loud in the dead silence. She scrambled out of bed and crept to the peephole. The burgundy hallway was empty, lit by a single, flickering fluorescent light at the far end. There was no one there. She told herself it was the building settling, an old pipe, anything. It happened again the next night. 2:17 nachts. Knock, knock, knock. This time, she didn't get out of bed. She just lay there, frozen, her heart hammering against her ribs until the sun came up. The note appeared the following morning. It was slipped so far under her door that it was halfway into her living room. It was on cheap, lined paper, torn from a spiral notebook. The message was scrawled in an aggressive, heavy-handed pen. I saw you. Why didn't you open? She ran to building management. The manager, a tired-looking man named Mr. Henderson, sighed. Ma'am, the camera on that end of the 13th floor hallway is always on the fritz. It's an old system. It's probably just kids from another floor playing a prank. I'll send a memo. He didn't believe her. She was on her own. That night, she barricaded the door with a chair. She sat on her sofa, wrapped in a blanket, unable to sleep. The apartment felt less like a sanctuary and more like a trap. Around 3 a.m., the building's intercom phone, the old, yellowed plastic unit on the wall, let out a piercing buzz. She stared at it. It was the internal line. It wasn't for guests at the front door. It was for building-wide announcements. Or calls from other units. It buzzed again, insistent. Her hand trembled as she picked it up. Hello. At first, there was only static. Hello, electric hum. Then a voice. It was a dry, cracking whisper, so close it felt like it was in her ear. I know you're awake, Sarah. Your pink pajamas are pretty. A sob escaped her throat. She slammed the phone back onto its cradle. She was wearing pink pajamas. She ran to her window, desperate for a connection to the outside world, to the normal city below. She stared down at the street, empty and slick with rain. No one, nothing. She was about to pull the curtains shut for good when her eyes drifted across the street. There was another residential building, mostly dark. It looked like it was undergoing renovation, a black mesh covering its facade. All its windows were dark, lifeless squares. All except one. On the floor that roughly corresponded to her own, in a pitch-black window, was a single, tiny, unwavering red. It wasn't a reflection. It was the glint of an active lens, a camera, or a pair of night vision binoculars. And it was aimed directly, unequivocally, at her. It had been watching her this whole time. It saw her unpack. It saw the chocolates. It saw her through the peephole. It was watching her right now, in her pink pajamas, paralyzed with fear. She didn't pack. She grabbed her keys, her laptop, and her purse, kicked the chair away from the door, and ran. She fled down the hallway, not daring to look back, and didn't stop running until she was in a cab. The police investigated the vacant building. They found the room. It was empty, save for a tripod, an empty energy drink can, and a scattering of cigarette butts. On the dusty floor, in the very center of the room, was a small, crudely sewn rag doll with mismatched button eyes. The hydraulic hiss of the bus doors closing was Tom's signal that the world was shrinking to just him, his headphones, and the smeared city lights. Route 44, the 1:15 a.m. drunk and tired special, was his nightly routine. As a college student pulling double shifts at the campus library, this was his only way home. The bus was old, groaning up hills, and smelling faintly of stale beer and wet upholstery. Tonight, it was raining. The windows were fogged, and Tom was exhausted. He was in his usual seat, 2/3 of the way back. There were only 3 other people. A woman asleep near the front, and a large figure in the very back corner, almost hidden in shadow. Tom paid him no mind. At the next stop, the woman got off. Now, it was just him and a man in the back. As the bus pulled away, down a long, dark avenue lined with warehouses, the man stood up. Tom felt a prickle of unease. This wasn't a stop. The man moved with a strange, lumbering gait, not unsteady but deliberate. He walked up the aisle, his boots heavy on the floor. He didn't walk past. He stopped, grabbing the cold metal pole right next to Tom's seat. The smell hit Tom first, a pungent, damp odor of mildew and something metallic like old pennies. The man was huge, his frame filling the aisle, and he wore a heavy black raincoat. The hood pulled so low Tom could only see the shadow of a chin. He just stood there, swaying with the bus's motion, saying nothing. Tom tensed, pulling out an earbud. "Can I help you?" The man's head turned slowly. "You dropped this." His voice was a low, gravelly rasp. He held out a hand encased in a filthy leather glove. In his palm was Tom's student ID card. Tom's blood ran cold. He fumbled for his wallet. It was in his pocket, but his ID card, which he knew he'd used to clock out at the library, was gone. "Oh, wow. Thanks. Where did you?" "You should be more careful, Thomas Miller." Tom froze. The man had read his full name. "Dormitory B, room 302. The man's head tilted, and Tom could just make out a pair of dark, unblinking eyes under the hood. That's a long walk from the next stop, especially if you take the alley shortcut. This was impossible. The alley was an unofficial shortcut all the students used. It wasn't on any map. "How do you know that?" Tom's voice was barely a whisper. The man let out a low chuckle, a sound like gravel turning over. "I see you." He then straightened up, pulled the cord, and got off at the next stop, disappearing into the industrial darkness. Tom stayed on the bus 2 extra stops, his heart pounding. He took a cab the rest of the way to his dorm, a luxury he couldn't afford. He thought it was over, a one-time, terrifying encounter. But a few days later, he was in the campus cafeteria, sitting by the window. He looked out onto the quad and saw him, the man in the black raincoat, standing motionless on the grass in the bright sunshine. He was just staring at the cafeteria building. As Tom watched, the man slowly lifted his head, as if he could feel Tom's gaze, and looked directly at him. He raised a gloved hand and waved. The stalking became Tom's new reality. He'd see the man standing across the street from his dorm. He'd catch a glimpse of the black raincoat disappearing around a corner on campus. One night, he got a friend request on a social media account he barely used. The profile name was Route 44, and the picture was a blurry, zoomed-in shot of the back of Tom's own head. He reported it to campus police. They filed a report, but said there was nothing they could do. The man hadn't done anything. He's just standing there, kid. It's not illegal to stand. Tom started to feel like he was losing his mind. He was failing classes. He couldn't sleep. One afternoon, he came back from class he'd skipped. He walked down the hall to room 302. His key felt sticky in the lock. He turned it, but the door was already unlocked. The deadbolt was halfway. Not locked, not unlocked. Just wrong. Tom stayed on the bus 2 extra stops, his heart pounding. He took a cab the rest of the way to his dorm, a luxury he couldn't afford. Silence. The room was empty. He checked the closet, the small bathroom. Nothing. He let out a shaky breath, blaming his own paranoia. He must have forgotten to lock it. He threw his backpack on his chair. The room smelled strange. Faint. Mildew and old metal. He turned to his bed, and that's when he saw it. Lying perfectly in the center of his pillow was a single 4x6 photo print. He picked it up. His hand was shaking so badly he almost dropped it. It was a picture of him, asleep, in that bed. His mouth was open, and he looked completely vulnerable. The photo was dark, grainy, and had been taken from the other side of the room, from the chair his backpack was now on. He flipped it over. Scrawled on the back in a messy, angry script were 3 words. "You sleep deep." It was supposed to be the perfect disconnect. 3 families, 12 of us in total, at a sprawling, beautiful cabin so deep in a national forest that the GPS gave up 10 miles back. The last instruction was turn left at the large, split oak tree. The isolation was the entire point. No cell service, no Wi-Fi, just a roaring fireplace, a stocked kitchen, and the deep, silent woods. The first day was idyllic. The kids played tag on a massive wraparound porch while the adults cooked a feast. The cabin was old, built from massive, dark logs, and smelled of pine and wood smoke. We felt like the only people on Earth. The second night, the weather turned. A violent, shrieking storm rolled in, and the isolation stopped feeling cozy and started to feel absolute. The power flickers died, then came back on, humming weakly. I'm a light sleeper. Around midnight, I was woken by a sound I couldn't place. It was a scraping. It was rhythmic, not random like a tree branch. Scrape, pause, scrape, pause. It was low to the ground, and it was coming from right outside the wall of our first-floor bedroom. "Mark," I whispered, shaking my husband. "Mark, wake up. Listen." He sat up, his head cocked. He heard it. Scrape, pause, scrape. "What is that?" "A raccoon," he mumbled. But it sounded heavier. It sounded, I thought, with a lurch of my stomach, like long fingernails or a metal tool being dragged along the logs. The sound moved. We heard it travel along the side of the house. Then we heard a muffled, "What the hell?" from our friend's bedroom down the hall. It was circling the cabin. "It's a bear," Dave, our friend, said, emerging from his room with a fireplace poker. "It smells the trash." He went to the front door and banged on it. "Hey, get out of here. Go on." The scraping stopped. We all stood in the dark living room, listening. A moment later, a heavy thud came from the back porch, as if something massive had jumped off it. "See?" Dave said, his voice a little too loud. "Just a bear." We went back to bed, but none of us slept. An hour later, a new sound began. This one was worse. It wasn't outside. It was above us. A slow, deliberate creak of a floorboard. Then another. The kids. My husband whispered. The kids were all in the huge loft room on the second floor. But this sound was above them. "This cabin doesn't have an attic," Sarah, Dave's wife, said, her voice trembling. "It's just the roof." Mark was already on his feet. "It's the crawl space. The one between the ceiling and the roof." We all gathered at the top of the stairs. The kids were awake, huddled together, their eyes wide. We heard walking. One of them whimpered. In the hallway's linen closet, behind the towels, was a small, 3-foot square wooden hatch in the ceiling. It was the only access to the crawl space. Mark stared at it. The simple hook and eye latch was undone. "It's open," he said. "Maybe the bear shook the house and it came loose?" Dave offered, but his voice was paper thin. Dave, being the tallest, stood on a chair. The rest of us stood back, holding flashlights and kitchen knives. He used a broom handle to push the hatch. It swung open with a puff of ancient, cold dust that rained down on him. The smell that hit us was unbearable. Rotting food, stale sweat, and human waste. Dave raised his high-powered flashlight and shined it into the black void. The beam illuminated a small, cramped space, choked with insulation and rafters. And in the corner, it lit up a nest. A filthy pile of our blankets, towels from the closet, and empty bags of chips from our pantry. And from the shadows of the nest, a face emerged. It was a man. His skin was waxy and pale, his hair matted with filth. His eyes were wide, white, and reflected the beam with a feral gleam. He was rail-thin, and he was smiling, a wide, broken-toothed grin of pure, triumphant malice. He had been living there, above us, listening to us, eating our food. Sarah screamed. Dave fell backward off the chair, slamming the hatch shut as he fell. A split second of silence was followed by a roar, a sound that was not animal, but human, and filled with such rage it shook the house. A deafening, violent pounding started on the hatch. He was trying to smash his way through. We dragged a massive oak dresser from the master bedroom and shoved it under the closet, blocking the hatch. The man above us went ballistic. We could hear him sprinting from one end of the crawl space to the other, screaming, tearing at the floorboards, trying to find another way down. We were trapped. No signal, miles from anyone. We barricaded the main doors with sofas. The 12 of us huddled in the downstairs living room. The storm raged outside, and the man raged above us. The kids were sobbing. At one point, the pounding on the ceiling stopped. A terrible, heavy silence fell, broken only by the wind. Then, from the second floor, we heard the sound of a window shattering. "He's out of the crawl space," my husband whispered, his face ashen. "He's in the house." We heard him. Heavy, frantic footsteps on the second floor. We heard doors being thrown open. He was in the kids' empty room. We heard him, laughing. We stood at the bottom of the stairs, armed with pokers and knives, waiting. We stayed like that for 4 hours, in total silence, listening to the storm die and the sun begin to rise. We didn't hear him leave. When the police finally arrived, after 2 of the men sprinted down the dirt road for miles to get a signal, they found the cabin empty. The crawl space was a hovel, just as we'd seen. The window in the kid's room was smashed from the inside out. He had escaped. On the wall of the crawl space, scrawled in what the police identified as charcoal from the fireplace, they found dozens of crude drawings. They were sketches of us, eating, laughing, sleeping. My name is Alex, and I am a creature of habit. I'm a freelance graphic designer, which means my schedule is my own, and I've fallen into a nocturnal rhythm. I work best when the city is silent. My apartment is on the ground floor, a fact I once loved for its convenience. No stairs, easy to move groceries. Now, I see it only as a vulnerability. My work nights, always in the same way. I close my laptop, stretch my back, and check the time. It's almost always just before 4 a.m. That's my signal to sleep. The first time it happened, I dismissed it as fatigue. I was in the kitchen, filling a glass of water, when I heard it. A soft, metallic click from the front door. It wasn't loud. It was the precise, delicate sound of a key being inserted into my deadbolt. I froze, the glass halfway to my lips. Then, a second sound, the snick of the lock's tumblers turning. But it was slow, hesitant. I stared at the deadbolt on my side of the door. The little brass knob was perfectly still. I waited, my breath held, for the door to swing open. 5 seconds. 30. A full minute of agonizing silence. Nothing. Just the low hum of my building's ancient heating. Must be Mrs. Petrov, I muttered to myself. She was my elderly neighbor in 1B, and she often confused her keys. I convinced myself that's all it was, and went to bed, though I lay awake for an extra hour. A week later, it happened again. 4 Weihnachts. I was brushing my teeth. Click. I ran from the bathroom, toothpaste still on my chin, and stared at the door. This time I saw it. The brass knob vibrated. It turned a fraction of an inch to the left, then stopped. It was as if someone had turned their key just enough to test the mechanism, to see if it was engaged. They were testing my lock. Gently, quietly. I didn't sleep for 2 days. I bought a heavy-duty security bar and jammed it under the doorknob every night before I even thought about relaxing. I also bought a cheap security camera, the kind for watching pets, and aimed it at my front door. For a week, there was peace. The camera feed showed nothing but my empty entryway. I started to believe it was just Mrs. Petrov or my own paranoia. Then the packages started. They weren't delivered by UPS or FedEx. They were left on my doormat between 3 and 5 a.m. The first was a small, square box wrapped in brown butcher paper, tied with rough twine. My name, Alex, was written on it in neat, ruler-straight block letters. Inside was a single porcelain doll's head, the kind from the 1950s. Its painted blue eyes were fixed in a wide, glassy stare. One side of its face was missing, revealing the hollow, darkened side. I dropped it, and it shattered on my floor. I called the police. An officer came, took a report with a sigh, and looked at my security bar. "Looks like you're secure, sir," he said, tapping it with his boot. "Probably just some local kids. It's a ground floor unit. It's an easy target for pranks. Just throw it out." The second box came 2 days later. Same brown paper, same block letters. Inside was a bird's nest, perfectly preserved. Cradled within it were 3 pale blue robin's eggs, all of them neatly cracked in half, the insides dried up. A message: I can get to fragile things. I was a wreck. I stopped working. I just sat on my sofa, watching the camera feed on my tablet, waiting. Yesterday, the third package arrived. It was larger, heavier, a 9 by 12 envelope. I didn't even bring it inside. I ripped it open right there in the hallway. It was a framed photograph. A new, glossy 8 by 10 print. My stomach dissolved. It was a picture of me, asleep, in my bed. My mouth was open, my head turned to the side. The photo was dark, grainy, and had been taken from the foot of my bed. The angle was low, as if the photographer had been kneeling. I saw my laptop on my desk. I saw my security bar wedged firmly under the doorknob, visible in the background. The photo had been taken with the security bar in place. My eyes scanned the print, landing on the digital timestamp in the bottom right corner. It was from 3 nights ago. The time, 4:15 a.m. I've spent the last 24 hours in a frantic, paranoid haze. How? The windows were locked. They are barred. There is no fire escape. I've checked every closet, every cabinet. My apartment is a 400-square-foot studio. There's nowhere to hide. Unless, I looked up, the air vent. A small 12x12-inch grate in the ceiling. It's too small for a person, isn't it? I haven't slept. I have a kitchen knife on the table and a baseball bat in my lap. My eyes are fixed on the clock on my stove. It's 3:58 a.m. My heart is a drum. I'm waiting for the click. 3:59 nachts. The silence in the apartment is so total. I can hear the blood rushing in my ears. 4 nachts. The clock ticks over. Nothing. No sound from the door. I let out a shaky breath, a tear of pure exhaustion rolling down my cheek. Maybe they're gone. Maybe the photo was the... Top. It's not coming from the door. It's coming from the ceiling, from the air vent. A slow, rhythmic metallic tapping. Top. And then a whisper, a dry, papery sound that travels down the metal duct. "I see you, Alex. Let me in." When Chloe and I bought the farmhouse, we were running from the city. We wanted land, quiet, and a house with history. We got all 3. The house was a 1920s original, set on 40 acres of overgrown woods, miles from the nearest neighbor. It had uneven, creaking floorboards, drafty windows, and a deep, fieldstone cellar with a heavy oak door that we kept bolted. Its strangest feature was the pantry. It was a deep, walk-in closet off the kitchen, colder than the rest of the house, and it smelled perpetually of dust, dried herbs, and something vaguely sour. Chloe felt it first. She's a light sleeper. About a week after we moved in, she shook me awake. "Mark, listen," she whispered, her body rigid. I listened. All I heard was the wind. "Babe, it's an old house. It's settling. Go back to sleep." "No," she insisted. It wasn't a creak. It was footsteps, downstairs, in the kitchen. I got up, grabbed a flashlight, and did a sweep of the ground floor. Nothing. The doors were locked. The windows were secure. See? Nothing. But she wouldn't be placated. Then the food started disappearing. It was small at first. I'd go for milk, and the carton would be almost empty. A pack of cheese I just bought was gone. Did you eat that entire block of cheese? I asked, annoyed. No, I thought you did, she shot back. We blamed each other, then we blamed rats. We set traps. The traps remained untouched, the cheese on them uneaten. But the next day, an entire leftover lasagna was gone from the fridge. The breaking point came a week later. Chloe woke me up, not with a whisper, but a silent, terrified shake. She was pointing at the doorway. I listened. This time I heard it. Clink, clink. The sound of a glass being gently set on the kitchen counter. Then, the soft thud of a cupboard door closing. I grabbed the baseball bat I'd started keeping by the bed. We crept down the hallway, our hearts in our throats. We rounded the corner into the kitchen. It was empty, but the refrigerator door was wide open, its light casting a pale, ghostly glow over the room. On the floor was a half-gallon of orange juice, empty, lying in a sticky puddle. A rat can't do that, Mark, Chloe whispered, her voice breaking. She was right. The next day, we drove into town and bought a motion-activated nanny cam. We set it on a high shelf, angled to see the refrigerator and, crucially, the pantry door. That night, we lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, too afraid to even speak. The next morning, we felt like zombies. We made coffee, our hands shaking, and took the memory card from the camera. We plugged it into my laptop. The footage began. For hours, it was nothing. Just the dark, silent kitchen, grainy in the infrared light. We watched the timestamp click past 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 Uhr nachts. At 3:17 a.m., the pantry door moved. It didn't swing open. It eased open just a few inches with an agonizing slowness. A shadow detached itself from the deeper blackness inside. A person, but it wasn't a burglar. It was wrong. It was emaciated, its limbs like sticks. It wore a pair of my old sweatpants and one of Chloe's university sweatshirts. Both items we had noticed were missing, assuming they'd been lost in a move. We watched, paralyzed, as this gaunt figure moved with a strange, jerky grace. It didn't walk like a person. It glided. It went to the refrigerator, opened it, and just stood there. For a full minute, it basked in the light, its head tilted as if enjoying the cold air. Then it reached in, pulled out a Tupperware of leftover chicken, and squatted on the kitchen floor. It began to eat with its bare, filthy hands, tearing at the food, stuffing it into its mouth with a desperate, animalistic hunger. The sound of it, the wet, smacking noises, was sickening. It finished, dropped the container, and wiped its mouth on Chloe's sweatshirt. Then it stood up. It turned. It looked directly at the camera. Its face was a pale, gaunt mask. Its hair was thin and patchy, its eyes too dark, bottomless pits in the infrared. It didn't look surprised. It looked curious. It stared into the lens for 10 full seconds. I felt like it was staring into my soul. Then, with the same unnatural slowness, it turned, slipped back into the pantry, and pulled the door shut, leaving it just slightly ajar. We didn't speak. Chloe was sobbing silently. I grabbed the bat. I kicked open the pantry door, ready to swing. It was full of our food. Cans, boxes, jars. Mark, behind the shelves, Chloe whispered, pointing. At the very back, behind a rickety wire shelf, a square of the wall paneling was loose. I pulled the shelf away, and the panel came with it, revealing a dark, narrow opening. A waft of cold, damp air and an overpowering smell of human waste, spoiled food, and something else, something like decay, hit us. It wasn't a closet. It was a passage. I shined my phone's flashlight into the hole. It wasn't empty. There were stone steps, crumbling and slick, leading down into the darkness, down into the part of the cellar we were told had been sealed off a century ago. As we stood there, frozen, we heard a sound from the blackness below. A low, wheezing cough, and then a voice, a dry, cracking whisper. So, hungry. We didn't wait. We ran out of the house, jumped in the car, and didn't stop driving until we hit the highway. The police found him down there. He'd been living in the sealed-off, forgotten sections of the cellar, navigating through the walls for who knows how long. He wasn't the previous owner. He was just someone who had never left.